It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday we are continuing talking about anger because people asked me to do it last week. I fixed my camera and now it's like eye lines are a thing. Okay then. Um yeah, I spent a lot of Leanna Care sessions last week looking here because my monitors were all screwed up. So I've solved one problem and created another. I'll do the help support this channel and get into the video, which is going to be about trauma and anger. We're continuing our discussion about anger. A lot of people said, yes, please do more on this subject. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. One thing that, I hate the term help, but, sort of be with clients, kind of hold their hand through the process, is the anger stage of healing, especially the anger stage of healing from trauma. And I'll be really tough love with people on this point because of my own experiences, and I wish I had more of the tough love and less of just the tough. But there are certain things that can get you into a lot of trouble healing from trauma, and this is one of these things that, because men's anger and women's anger are treated differently by society, trauma in men is often overlooked. In fact, it's so overlooked that any client I get now, if it's anger issues or, people come and say, I am concerned about my attitudes towards women. I have some thoughts that, I don't want to have anymore. I'll screen them for trauma, because trauma can, especially in men, and I think part of it is that men are not, it's not okay for men to say they're not okay the same way. And so it's like a, volcanic vent. When you cap the main funnel, it leaks out the side and causes just as much damage, just from a different direction. And so that's what I want to talk about. Anger, especially unhealthy anger, is a part of trauma that I have personally experienced. And not having someone who knew what was going on, who could tell me what was going on and tell me what to do about it, that I think that I could have gone through so much less suffering, been stuck much less long, for this one thing. Because every time I'd stick my head out of the proverbial cave, every time I'd start healing from the trauma, every time I stopped internalizing it and started on that path to better, I'd feel this overwhelming anger. Like the way I described it as, when you smack your thumb or you stub your toe, and that feeling, that's what it felt like, only in the feels, right? And every time that happened, I'd get negative experiences from the people around me, and it shoved me back down, and that's why when I played, I forget which God of War game it was, probably 2, I think, but no, it was the first one, where Kratos is, crawling out of, the underworld, out of Hades, and, it's not called Hades. Hades is the guy, but out of the underworld, and all these hands are grabbing at him, trying to pull him back down. I'm like, that's it. That's what it's like. And that's in pretty much every God of War game, some sequence like that. Interestingly, in Ragnarok, they do a lot of those tropes with Atreus. And I think that's very interesting. Yeah, it kept me stuck for a really long time. And on the one hand, I understand why people have a bad reaction, especially with people with their own trauma and issues related to angry people and being afraid of angry people. That was some of it. But some of it was also just, well, you're not supposed to be angry, you know? And there's this thing in my life that people expect me to conform to the standards the world sets for women, but then they treat me more like a guy. And so, because it's just the way I read, right? And I'm not complaining about that. I would, the being treated like a guy part, that doesn't bother me. It's getting punished for not, coming to a sufficient feminine standard, because I don't get any of the benefits of that. I'm caught between two things. But what it's made me really empathize with is the way guys get stepped on with strong emotions. I've experienced that firsthand in a way that, a lot of women don't. Because when women get angry, women tend to get treated like they're crazy, but not as scary. Men are just, an angry man is instantly scary, right? Like and that, oh, you're scary. And it's like, I don't, if somebody hits me, I'll counter, but I don't hit first. I don't do anything terrible. Oh, you're scary when you're angry. So, I understand how society pushes you down when you're trying to get up. You're trying to get back up from being knocked down, right? And it's that thing of, there's a party that's like, just stay down. It hurts less. Just stay down. If this is where the world wants you, just stay there. But then something in you is like, and then you start getting, oh, you're inside all the time. You don't do anything. You're so isolated. So you try. And that anger, which is a part of the process, comes bubbling back up again. And then you get stopped again. Right? So what do I do about it? Well, as my nose, oh God, I was digging through stuff, dust, still allergic to dust. Okay. Just looked up, my nose is super red. I'm like, oh God. I better take something for that after this video. But okay, so what do we do? This, in my experience, is not a step you can skip. And it is really, really hard to heal from trauma when you're not allowed to do the steps you need to heal. Because, part of healing from trauma is the grief process. I have a theory, I can't prove it, but something I've been sort of noodling around in my head is that people who know how to grieve in a healthy way can process things. People who don't know how to grieve, who don't know how to go, well, that really sucked, and feel it and process it and move on, I wouldn't be surprised to see a link between rates of PTSD and, a lack of skills regarding grieving, or a lack of social permission regarding grieving. And I really think for a lot of people, it is that lack of social permission in their direct environments that really causes that getting stuck phenomenon. And it is harder when you don't have people supporting you through the process. That's what I try to be. With the Leanna Care stuff. I had to do it alone. It was way harder than it had to be, but I did it. It is possible, right? Um, so here's real talk. There is a difference between healthy anger and unhealthy anger. There is. Um, and the challenge when it's trauma-based anger is that it's hard, because the difference between healthy and unhealthy anger is that healthy anger is motivating, right? You feel bad, so you do something about it. That's different than lashing out. But when you are lashing out, you think you're channeling your anger into action, but you're really not. There's a difference between channeling anger into action to make meaningful changes and just lashing out and getting angry at people who may or may not deserve it and causing a whole bunch of hurt feelings, but never asking for what you want, never formulating meaningful changes. I know for me, I am okay with conflict. Yes, I'm one of those rare people who is okay with conflict as long as it gets somewhere. I'm all for healthy arguing, right? But healthy arguing requires two grown-ups. And when you are in trauma, there is a big part of you that is not a grown-up. When you hear people talking about inner child, I personally don't like that metaphor. But I understand it. Because to me, it's more like everybody has a different name for it. For me, it's just, I'm in, what it is you go into fawn, freeze, fight or flight mode. Otherwise known as fight or flight, but that's not all of it. It's fawn, freeze, fight, or flight. And fawn and freeze are really, really important to add to that because it informs how people manifest unhealthy anger, right? Rooted in trauma. There are some people who just use anger as control. And they might have stuff that's traumatic in their backstory, but there's a consciousness about it that it's like, no, that's not a trauma response. That's somebody being a dick. They may not know, or they may not admit to themselves that they're getting angry so people go away. But, I had a double whammy because where I grew up, at Jane and Finch, recently renamed University Heights by the blessed levels, various levels of government. But, growing up there, you made yourself seem bigger than you were so people wouldn't pick on you, right? You had to put up a front. And, that's why I'm so called scary when I'm angry. Just because I don't do the whole, oh, I'm a victim, right? I'm like, whoa, freaking Wolverine, man. Make yourself look bigger. Make yourself, don't mess with me. And that's really misunderstood. That's not a trauma response. That's a self-defense mechanism, right? A trauma response is when you feel like you are fighting for your life over something that is not life-threatening. Because and it's not even that it reminds you of the thing. It's deeper than that. That's why they call it a trigger. It's just a switch flips and pff, you're in another place now. Now with complex trauma, with complex PTSD, it's even more complicated than that. Because complex trauma is like this pattern, like this lifelong pattern, right? And certain patterns keep replicating. You're abused by people, you're a doormat, you don't have boundaries. And so when those switches get flipped, time gets wibbly wobbly because your body is responding to a whole bunch of things all at once. And that's why I highly recommend Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now that all the award season hype is over, just go see the movie. It's not typical Oscar bait. It's good. But it's an action movie. It's like a superhero movie, only, well, I love superhero movies, but it has that like message that I think all superhero movies could have. But the Everything Everywhere All at Once, that is what complex trauma feels like. And that is why people start lashing out and jumping at shadows and you know, having unmanageable anger that creates more problems, increases stress levels. It's not solving problems, it's creating more, right? And the technical term for this is terrible. It used to be called hypervigilance, which I thought made more sense, but they now call it as hyperarousal. And arousal makes it seem like you're alert, right? No, it means you're in constant fawn, freeze, fight, or flight mode. And, you know, the reason I keep the fawn and freeze in, even though it's way harder to say, is I used to be able to spot it a mile away in so-called male feminists, the nice guys, who you just got a sense that there was this brewing anger underneath the surface and they secretly had major issues with women, but they couldn't admit it to themselves. So that's why they thought all men had issues with women, except them. They're the nice guy. Well, that I'm the nice guy is a form of a fawning response, trying to appease someone you associate with your trauma. And then they freeze up at certain points, right? That's why, you know, a lot of people don't trust nice guys. And it's unfortunate because there are some legitimately nice guys out there. And the difference is actual guys who are nice don't have that simmering undercurrent of anger, right? And the problem is you get traumatized women who are hypervigilant. I prefer the term hypervigilant. Hyperaroused just sounds, you know. But they're hypervigilant, hyper-attuned to danger signals. And so they sense that anger. They may not totally understand it, but they sense it. And so they join women's groups because they think not only are they going to help understand their experience, but it's a safe space, right? And then you have the male feminist allies who are projecting all the stuff that trips their hypervigilance with cause because those dudes are angry. And that's how sort of cultivated misandry happens in feminist circles, because the vast majority of the guys they're interacting with have that underlying undercurrent of anger. And so they think it's just every man is like that. Meanwhile, they're pushing away guys who might not have that because that, you know, demanded allyship is just like, well, if you don't consider yourself a feminist ally, then I am not safe with you. There are some guys who are just, you know, grew up wealthy, been taught that matters, and so they're feminist allies and not angry all the time. But there are just way too many guys who are male feminists or, you know, feminist allies who fit that description. Trust me. It's a big part of the reason that I am a pariah in those circles, because you get to a point where there's a challenge, right? I had one of those male feminists or feminist allies in, you know, the Polygon circle in gaming. I gave my opinions on the Lara Croft reboot and, the Tomb Raider stuff, the newer games. Absolutely disagree. And he told me all the reasons I was wrong. And it's like, and it was the way he leapt into the stump speech that I'm like, whoa. And of course, years later, he was outed for problematic behavior. And was I at all surprised? No. Now, he did connect me to get me all of one freelance job, but, at what cost? But, so that's the thing. I put up with the angry tirade because it was a gatekeeper thing. And when you go through enough of that, you think that's all there is. Now flip over to the other side of the coin, right? Guys who are told you have to express your feelings, you have to feel your feelings, but every time they do, and that feeling happens to be anger, they're squashed. And because a lot of therapists and a lot of concerned family members are women, they're getting squashed by the very women telling them that they need to feel their feelings and express their feelings. Well, for a lot of guys, and me, at one point, anger was the first thing I felt when I felt anything at all. And what I eventually learned is that is a process for somebody. And I didn't get, you have every right to be angry. Anger is a valid emotion. We need to set some conduct standards here. I'm not going to sit here and let you call me names. That doesn't help anybody. I didn't cause your problem, And there's this whole other side vent with, well, I won't insult you, but I'll heavily criticize you. It's no better. But that's a fight for another day because we can only do so much in a half hour. And I want to get to solutions. But, I've seen a lot of guys, because of these, getting squashed when they try to express feelings. They have these things that come across as very misogynistic. And one could say, well, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, But then there's always, it might be a goose, so watch out. And so it's the sort of thing where I don't think people are consciously going, I have issues with women. It's that hypervigilance thing, right? The people who are squashing them happen to be women, a mother, a teacher, an older sister, somebody with some kind of power over them at an early age. And so that's why it looks so much like a child throwing a tantrum, because everything everywhere all at once collapses. They regress to, the emotional capacity of a 6-year-old because that's when it broke them first. And so we get a lot of really, I'll say, strong reactions to media featuring women. That, the response seems outsized. And again, it's not behavior that solves problems. And I much prefer that terminology to, it's not appropriate behavior, because who determines appropriateness, right? We can measure behavior that solves problems versus behaviors that don't solve problems. Your life doesn't get any better whether you watch a Marvel show or a Disney show or a Star Wars show. Disney, I mean like animated stuff, right? Or a DC show or a Warner Brothers show or whatever, right? Your life doesn't get better. That is not the problem. That is not what's really making you miserable. So that's not healthy anger, right? There are a few things I've been like, for example, I really don't like Bo-Katan in The Mandalorian. I love the rest of the show. I don't like Bo-Katan at all. And the reasons don't really matter. I just don't like her. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it because it's not that important to me, right? And I'm not going to go to war over Bo-Katan and The Mandalorian. I watch around her that they've done something to Katie Sackhoff's face. It's like her eyes are too big, but not in the obvious like Alita Battle Angel thing. It's like they're trying to make her look more like the cartoon character, like the 3D animated character that she started as, and it just looks weird. But also there's a bunch of stuff about the character I don't like. But am I that upset about it? No. Right? Because it's not worth it. Somebody disrespects me in the real world, and I say, please don't do that again. I don't like it. And they pull a make me, or they start lecturing me. Oh no, that's an issue. And this is the difference in healthy anger and unhealthy anger. I will get in their face, but it's not lashing out. I am in control. I just no longer feel the need to be nice. If I start being nice to a person who is disrespecting me, that is a fawn response. No. If they're not playing nice, I'm not going to play nice, because if it breaks down, it solves a problem for me. I don't have to talk to this person anymore, and they know what they did. I don't like ghosting. I really don't like just insta-blocking. I do it sometimes because I think something's a bot or a troll account. But for somebody who I think is just having a bad day or is a little misguided, I'll fight with them a bit. And I get called unhinged. It's like, no. That is me being fair. But that is me sussing out whether a person is a problem or not. And if a person can't play fair and can't respect, please don't say that. I solve the problem by blocking. That's how healthy anger works. When you get that, oh hell no, response, you can stay in control and do something about it and not second guess your feelings, right? That's a valid feeling I had. Something about that bothered me. Okay, what is it? Right? And then you get people complaining, oh, she blocked me. Every person who's been blocked by me deserved it. I don't just, oh, you criticized me, blocked. Nope. And that gets me called a whole bunch of names. But you know what? Fine. They're problems too. The great thing about being open about that is people show themselves and then they are gone from my life. Now, not everybody has to have that line. Some people are willing to take more because they're like, okay, I like these other things, whatever. That's cool. Different people can have different limits and different boundaries. That's mine because part of the healing I had to do from PTSD is to stop being such a damn doormat. You know, I get really angry and I'd scrap, but I'd also be a doormat because, you know, I was convinced that if anybody ever really got to know the real me, they'd leave me. Core of the trauma, right? So I took a lot of shit I shouldn't have and was constantly overextended. And that was my work. That was what I had to do. So if you think I'm a bitch these days, that's why. And that's what everybody has to do, right? Because I set the same rules for myself as everybody else. If somebody tells me not to do something and it's sincere, like I don't like that, please don't do that, I will stop. I don't have to agree with them. Because that is me. That is a great way to allow someone to show you that they're coming at you in good faith. You know, this guy on Twitter last week, Katie Montgomery, my phone auto-completed. She spells her name with a Y. I spelled it I-E. I said, you misspelled her name. That's misgendering. Apologize. He was being a dick, but I did misspell her name. And so I said, sorry, I misspelled her name. You know, but then I said, I got you to refer to her as a woman. Katie's trans. Before that, he was calling her a man. So, oops. And there's a thing. Yeah, I got her name wrong. I'm not going to quibble about whether or not it was. Now, that's different than being dogpiled for something. That was a one on one thing. He shut up after that. It was pretty funny. But yeah, it was a mistake. I misspelled her name. No big deal. That's healthy anger. Because the other thing about healthy anger, you know it's in control when it's trauma based, when you can admit an error like that because you're not constantly waiting. Like the minute somebody is angry at you, demanding something of you, and you did fuck up, you can admit it, you're good. Because just because they're angry, that guy couldn't do anything to me. But when you're in trauma and anger is a trigger, any guy gets angry, remember I said that, make yourself look bigger? So how do you get there? This is the hard part. It really is retraining your brain to not have that I gotta look bigger response. Because people who lash out in anger due to trauma, they're being triggered, right? And so it can seem, it often is completely out of place. And underneath it is usually fear or pain. And that's the shitty part. Because when you get the anger under control, all that pain and all that fear that you've been not feeling because you couldn't feel it, because you couldn't function, hits you. And so much like when people chastise you for being angry and so you slip back into numbness or depression, when that fear, that pain hits, the desire, the need to go back into that defensive anger is very, very strong. And that's what happens when people lash out. They feel fear or pain. The anger kicks in to protect because they'd rather fight than freeze. Because running away didn't hurt. They feel like they can't escape. There's the trauma. Bad things are going to happen to them. They can't stop it, right? That's how it works. And what it is about is slowing it down in those moments. And it's terrifying at first because you have to sit in that feeling that's in a situation like this, somebody hurt me and I couldn't do anything to stop it. And you have to sit in that feeling of powerlessness. And it'll waffle. You'll feel angry, you'll feel scared, you'll feel hurt, you'll have to grieve it. Grief's not linear, and so it goes all over the place. And it'll take a while to process it. But if you can stop yourself from lashing out, and it is totally fine to walk away from a conversation or take a few minutes, just communicate like, look, I'm overwhelmed right now. I need to take 5-10 minutes and then I'll come back and I'll be happy to talk to you. But I need you to not come at me that hard. And you go and you take your time and you come back and you solve the problem. That's anger that solves problems. When you feel that rising inside you, don't ignore it. That's there for a reason. You don't have to actively do anything about it to not ignore it. You can say, I'm feeling this. It's valid. Trust my gut. Now, how am I going to fight smart instead of hard? Some people call that wise mind, but that, again, wisdom's a much longer arc. It is more, it's more learn to block, right? Like if you're just hacking away from software boss style, like eventually they're going to get you because they hit harder than you, right? But if you block, okay, it might be a little chip damage, but then you can parry, right? But a lot of the time with trauma, the person you think is a threat is not actually attacking you. And that's why it causes more problems than it solves, because it's just a memory of something. It's not the something. But because you are traumatized, it's everything everywhere all at once. And so with time, when you validate the feeling without doing anything about it, you will feel that reaction less because you're healing from the trauma. Your limbic system is resetting. You don't get the flood of stress hormones that causes the hypervigilance, causes the constant fawn, freeze, fight, or flight mode. And it gets easier and easier and easier. And one day you'll realize, hey, I don't have that reaction anymore. But you do have to retrain the levels. It is possible. The brain's very neuroplastic. The brain can rewire itself. It's better than, having that unhealthy anger all of the time. And that's it for this Manly Monday. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it to work through some of these issues, these sorts of things. 6 people need Leanna Care's sessions, subsidized care sessions. So if you can, thank you so much. And thanks for watching Manly Mondays.